God, it was great to hear the Targaryen theme again. Like when Rhaenyra is riding the dragon over the Red Keep, and the music's all just like like it was so good. Like I got nostalgic a bit because obviously the instrumental of it is pretty much the Winds of Winter track from season 6. You know, the music that plays when Daenerys is sailing her fleet across the narrow seas back to Westeros. Like it's just it was so good. I got the feels like Ramanjwani's back and just it set such a good precedent and tone for House of the Dragon. So we have the first episode of House of the Dragon, and overall, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. The overall filmmaking and tone and the setup for the story of the season was really interesting. The character work done on this was incredible. I love the characters in the show. Just from this first episode, Damon Targaryen, Matt Smith as Damon Targaryen, is my favorite character. He is such a bastard in like all the right ways. He is just so evil and smarmy, but also he's very understandable. In many ways, I kind of equate him to Loki. The scene where he's talking to Aerys in the throne room after Aerys learns that Damon mocked the death of his son, calling him the heir for a day. And they have this big full-on confrontation in the throne room where Aerys is just like, why do this? Why would you mock me? All I've ever done is try to love you. And Damon's just like, no, all I've ever tried to do is be there for you. And you keep pushing me away. You didn't make me your heir. You didn't ask me to help rule by your side. You always pushed me away, pushed me back to the Vale. And like, you could feel the raw emotional bond between these two brothers, and just Damon as a character. He is just very much the Loki type character, the power hungry but also insecure man. And honestly, Matt Smith's portrayal of this character is great. I mean, I haven't read Fire and Blood, so I don't know what the character is like in the book, but overall, I thought Matt Smith was just so good in this. Also, the armor he wears is just so cool. Like, the way it's designed, the helmet, it's beautiful. From a visual standpoint, House of the Dragon looks great, and it's funny, because in many ways, I think this is the most A Song of Ice and Fire feeling that the Game of Thrones world, the HBO Game of Thrones world, has ever felt like. I don't know what it was, but there was something about the aesthetic of this show that just felt more like A Song of Ice and Fire than Game of Thrones ever did, which is weird because obviously the first 4 seasons are very good adaptations of the A Song of Ice and Fire books, but from a visual standpoint, just the way everything is designed in House of the Dragon, it made me go, this feels like George R. R. Martin's work in a way. Like, from a visual standpoint, Damon's armor, the heraldry that's surrounding King's Landing, a lot of the banners and all the sigils, they just felt like they were pulled from, like, the artwork of, like, the graphic novels of, say, Duncan Egg. Even the slight redesign of the Iron Throne just feels more in line with the books, and in many ways, I kind of wish HBO would, like, go back and digitally alter the Iron Throne from the Game of Thrones show and make it look more like the Iron Throne in this show, just because I like the balance of keeping it similar to the Game of Thrones show, but also adding in the idea from the books that the Iron Throne in the books is supposed to be a mountain of swords so high to climb on, all that kind of stuff. From a story perspective, I think episode 1 is very good, though I do think from a pacing perspective it's a little slow. For me, the episode really picks up around about the time the tournament begins. After that, the episode kind of just moves by at a clip, and also you get a lot of the political machinations, the idea of where the story is going to go for this season. And as I've mentioned earlier, the character work is just so well done. Like, as I've mentioned, Damon Targaryen is really fascinating, but also I think Aerys Targaryen is also very fascinating. This king of Westeros, this Targaryen king, you'd think would be ruthless and cruel, but in many ways, he's just a good guy. He seems like just a good person. But just because you're a good person does not necessarily make you a good king. We see this in this episode. His small council is either not necessarily turning against him, but they have their own political schemes and machinations in place. Also, Hightower, played by Rhys Ifans, is also just a really fascinating and interesting character. Damon, Aerys, and Otto Hightower were my favourite in this episode. They were all just so interesting and unique. There is a loyalty from Otto Hightower to King Aerys, but you can also tell that Otto has his own political ambitions and his own desires for maybe the Iron Throne. I don't know, I haven't read Fire and Blood, and so all this stuff is just new and interesting to me, and honestly, I can't wait to see this all play out visually. Like, it just seems so just rich. I think the story is going to be really interesting because I have a sneaking suspicion that Damon Targaryen will eventually become king through some kind of bloody and mean way. And the writing of the politics in this episode was just really good. Like, this was stuff we hadn't seen in the Game of Thrones franchise since season 5, maybe. Like, the political writing in this show was strong. The small council meetings in this episode was very strong. We hadn't gotten scenes like this since maybe Game of Thrones season 4. And it's just just this political writing that is just so subtle and nuanced and just well written that I've missed it. Game of Thrones season 5 sort of squanders all the political things. D&D didn't care about the politics after A Storm of Swords because obviously their main goal with Game of Thrones was adapting the Red Wedding, and they did that, and then they obviously wrapped up season 4 of Game of Thrones, and that's probably the last like great season of Game of Thrones. And you can tell they just didn't care about the politics in the later seasons because most of the politics is either very simple or just very surface level and doesn't really matter. Like, the Dawn subplot in season 5 is so simplified compared to the book subplot, because in the show, Cersei's just like, oh, Jaime Bronn, go rescue Marcella from Dawn because she got a threatening message from Ariana Sand, and it's kind of like, no, that's not what the whole thing was in the book. It was this whole grand conspiracy with Dawn, and there was an uprising, and Marcella gets an ear chopped off and all that kind of stuff. It's really interesting in the books, but D&D didn't care about that. They just wanted to go off and do some weird thing in Dawn.
You want a good girl, but you need a bad pussy.
There wasn't a lot of subtlety and nuance to the political writing. It was just, oh yeah, things just happen. But in this first episode, you can tell that there is this sneaking ambition from Otto Hightower. You can tell that Damon Targaryen is plotting something very sinister in order to get the throne from his brother and his niece. You can also tell that some of the Grand Maesters on the council are doing their own little machinations and schemes. Even the other Targaryen on the small council, I think his name is like the Sea Serpent or something like that. But he literally goes from, oh yeah, Damon should be your heir, and then immediately he switches to find another candidate, and it's like, whoa, what are you doing here? What are you trying to say? And then there's also the fact of Rhaenyra Targaryen, who Aerys at the end of the episode names his heir, and then he even talks to her about prophecy. And it's funny because the sequence where he talks to her about prophecy and how he's kind of just like, oh, I've kept you in the shadows at arm's length and all that kind of stuff, but now I've realized you are my heir, and also there is a destiny, there is an endless winter coming, and we have to be prepared for it, there is a prophecy and all that kind of stuff. And in a way, that whole scene just kind of made it seem like, oh yeah, we need to fix the mistake D&D made with the Long Night, we need to make it make sense because Arya Stark killing the Night King made no sense, so we have to make it some kind of prophecy or something. And so they have King Aerys holding Catspaw, and they're just like, yeah, see, it was seeded all along, Arya Stark is gonna kill the Night King with Catspaw because of prophecy, and it's like, no, that's just them fixing D&D's mistake. But no, I'm also interested to see what happens with Rhaenyra, because she's not the most complex, but also I can't wait to see her grow and see how she develops in this position as heir to the Iron Throne. Whether or not that's going to bring conflict with her friendship with Alicent Hightower. Again, we have the younger version of Alicent Hightower, but we don't have Olivia Cook yet, and I'm excited to see Olivia Cook because Olivia Cook is phenomenal. I think she's great. If you haven't seen Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, oh my god, that movie emotionally broke me. Like, it's such a good film. Also, the birthing scene was genuinely terrifying. Like, it's one of the most horrific things you could probably imagine that would happen during a birthing sequence. And just the fact that they do like this botched cesarean section, and Aerys has to choose between either his wife or the baby, and he chooses sacrificing his wife, but then the baby also dies too. Like, it's genuinely upsetting, but in a really visceral and logical story way. Him making such a tough and almost horrible decision just really affects his character. You see the impact the death of his wife and child have on him in the small council scenes that follow, where he's just there basically going, I don't care, I need to mourn the death of my wife and child, I don't care about who succeeds me. And then there's also little character details too about Aerys, like how he likes to make models and how he's designing a model of King's Landing in his own room. Like, again, I think all that stuff is just really cool, and overall, I just can't wait to see the rest of this show. If this show is as good as the first episode, then I'm going to be very excited for, say, the Jon Snow sequel spin-off series, because if House of the Dragon is quality, then that must mean that the people running the Game of Thrones franchise at HBO know what they're doing, and obviously bringing back Kit Harington to reprise his role as Jon Snow in a sequel spin-off show just makes me even more excited, because if House of the Dragon is quality, then that show will be quality too, and that's just great. But then again, this show could jump off a cliff in the next episode or the next 2 episodes in the penultimate episode, and so I will be back to review the entire season of House of the Dragons, but just I wanted to give you my quick thoughts on episode 1. I thought it was great. It was great being back in Westeros with a more George R. R. Martin, A Song of Ice and Fire feel to it. I love the character work done with Damon, with Aerys, with Otto Hightower, with Rhaenyra. I just can't wait to see how this story unfolds, and overall, I'm excited, and I think this show potentially is going to be great. But what did you guys think of the first episode of House of the Dragon? Let me know in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, follow me on social media, all that good stuff, and until we meet again, I'll see you guys next time.